So it's good to see everybody. My name is Neil Hirsch, for those who I've not met, and I have the honor of getting to serve as a member of the Board of Trustees at Construct. And as part of that, also serve as the chair of the Community Engagement Committee for Construct. And tonight's 101 session is an outgrowth of a lot of the effort that we've been making in terms of our community engagement strategy. Tonight's webinar is all about learning that meaning behind the words affordable housing. What do we mean by it? How does it actually operate? What are some considerations we might need to be able to make in our own towns and broader Berkshire community? And so we wanted to find a way, because those words affordable and housing have a lot of meaning packed into them and have a lot of rules and regulations packed into them. And we have two of our local experts in that, in Jane and June, who are going to outline a lot of this for us and give us that 101 education. The goal of which being by the end of tonight's webinar, hopefully we'll all walk away with a little bit more understanding about how affordable housing can operate in our own communities, so that then when new issues come up, whether it be in Great Barrington, Stockbridge, Lenox, what have you, we each can be able to find ways to say yes in my backyard. That we can find ways that we can actually push for and help out with increasing affordable housing opportunities in our community. After tonight's session, we want to be able to follow up with everyone. So if there are questions that don't get answered tonight, that you're hoping to have a touch point about, there will be an email that'll go out to all of the participants. And as I said earlier, we are recording tonight's session so that should anyone want to go back and review the PowerPoint presentation or anything that was said, or go deeper, there's the opportunity to review that. Again, just two pieces of housekeeping tonight. It's the intent that tonight be conversational as much as it is educational also. So please do put up your actual hand or your digital hand on Zoom if you have a question, so that we can make sure to address the questions and issues and concerns and thoughts and ideas that you have. And again, also feel free to use the chat box for the same feature. And then also, if you can make sure to let us know who is in the room by making sure that the name in your Zoom box reflects who's sitting in the room with you, that would be greatly appreciated. I think that covers it. So let me turn it over to Jane Ralph, Executive Director at Construct Inc.
Great, thanks, Neil. June and I definitely want to share as much as we have time to share tonight without making this a 5-hour marathon, which it easily could be because it is a complex issue. It's also very exciting that while June and I have expertise in the way Construct does this work and the way that we've studied the way this work is done, there's lots of other folks in the room with their own expertise, whether it's landlord-tenant issues, whether it's regional planning boards, whether it's individual towns, as well as definitely lived experience with needing to find a place to live in the Berkshires and finding that may be difficult. And so we really, one of the things Construct is committed to is remaining and being the community-based organization that we were founded to be. And that means that solutions evolve in community. And this is one of the ways we can help solve the issues related to the need for affordable housing in the South Berkshires. So thank you so much for being here. And hopefully this will be the first of many conversations, or is another step in the road to really meeting the need for the folks, not only living with low income, but also middle and moderate income. There's a need for housing at all those levels. And hopefully we can share a little information about what that looks like. And what some of the possible options might be based on our experience. Neil, June, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. I'm June Wolf. I'm the housing director for Construct. I've been in housing for many years, and I'm happy to share what I've learned and to learn from you tonight.
Great. We do have a few slides just to kind of direct the conversation to start. We hope to move through those pretty quickly and then move to conversation as quickly as we can. We'll take questions as we go, but also kind of want to make sure that we get through some of the basics so we all are working from the same viewpoint. And Neil, you can move the things forward. Great. At Construct, we always want to start with the people who need affordable housing, the people who we know who live in affordable housing, the folks who are traveling too far because they don't have affordable housing to be able to work and be part of our communities. So that's really where we want to start tonight, as much as possible. So if you can go to the, oh, actually, let me correct myself. We're starting with the fact that this is an issue that isn't unique to the Berkshires. It's all over the news. So June pulled out some of the headlines that we've been seeing. So that's what's in the news, among many, many other things. And it's interesting, I heard from a supporter this week who has worked a lot in this area in urban areas and is very familiar with the need for affordable housing in urban areas and has been just working in the area in rural communities recently. And through what she's seen in our community has come to recognize that the need is just as great in the rural communities as it is in the urban areas, not herbal areas. That was me trying to talk too fast. Unfortunately, the national answers are often based on an urban model. And so one of the exciting things about gathering as community tonight is what can we learn from that and pull for a more rural community, and where can we lead the way in terms of what that can look like for our community. So now we'll move to who are the people that are in our housing, or the people that have these needs. Since COVID, any barrier we had pre-COVID has just become worse as we've moved into this now second year of COVID. So folks have needed their homes not just to be a place to live, a place to go home after work, but it's had to be in many cases their place of work, their hospital, their place of worship, their gym. Homes have needed to do much more than they've ever done before. And there's no guarantee that it won't go back to that. And for many of us, we're still primarily working at home. We're still primarily staying at home. And I think there we go. So one of the things we always also want to pay attention to is the disproportionate impact on some communities where housing is concerned. This graphic, and there's another one with more detail that I can direct you to, shows a little bit of the racial disproportionality in homelessness. In this case, the 2.3 number refers to the general the percentage of folks who are Black in our community, as well as in Franklin and Hampshire County. The portion of the overall population is 2.3 that are Black folks in our community. Yet they represent 17.1% of the overall homeless population in our community. And then for Latinx families or households, it's 4.9% of the population are Latinx, but 17.5% of the homeless population. And that's due to the historic inequalities in housing that have been institutionalized in our country and the long-term effect of that. So that's something we always want to pay attention to, and that the state and the federal government always want to pay attention to as well. So we always want to make sure that we're paying attention to those who are underserved in the housing, getting their housing needs met. These two maps, which may be hard to read, so another reason we'll send out the stack later, shows the percentage of individuals in each of our communities in the Berkshires living below the poverty line or living with low income. And if you can see the numbers, you'll see that there's relatively low percentages of folks living in poverty in the Berkshires as a whole and in the South Berkshires in particular. But there's a whole lot of folks that are living with low income. And most of those folks are folks who are what we've now come to think of as our essential workers. They're not just the folks who are working entry-level jobs, but they're folks that are providing the essential services that allow the South Berkshires and the Berkshires as a whole to thrive. And so we focus on both of those populations at Construct, but we're particularly concerned about those folks who are living with low income, not falling down into that poverty setting because they're living in homes they can't afford, or they're traveling too far to be able to work here in the Berkshires. So that's always a big concern for us at all as well. And this graphic it shows the makeup of the folks on Construct's wait list. We have 670 plus households on our wait list for our 67 units of affordable housing in the South Berkshires. And I don't need to read the whole thing to you, hopefully. Can you raise your hand if you can actually read what the graphic says? Good, so I won't read it to you then, because I'm guessing most of you can read. But the largest percentage of folks on our wait list are those young families between 26.5 and 35 years old. I'm not sure why that's 26.5, but that's the data that we have. So that's a large population. It's certainly a population that we want to keep in the Berkshires if we can, and that we want to attract. And then what's the other information that we have about these households? If you can just let all these come up, Neil. The largest population on or subpopulation on our wait list are single parents. And so that's a mom or a dad, usually with one or more kids, that's looking for a place to live. So most often a single income trying to support a family. And that's 23.4%, whereas all of the other percentages are under 20. 16.8% of our wait list are folks coming out of homelessness, and 16% are folks with disabilities. All of the other areas mentioned here are significantly lower percentages. And these are the folks that actually live in our housing, the careers that they have. And June's been a property manager in addition to being now housing director. Is there anything you want to say about the communities?
Yeah, what would we do without these people? I mean, as you're looking at the jobs that are showing up, ask yourself, when you live in a community, where would you be without people who hold these jobs? Because that happens sometimes in communities. Are we going to switch to the next one? Okay, this is where I take over. So Jane put together a slide that shows the housing units by structure type. And you can see that we are heavily weighted toward single family homes. And we are also heavily weighted toward home ownership. Most of the tan ones that you see are owned homes. Now, one of the key numbers on this slide is in the bottom that says that this is between 2015 and 2019. There was a massive shift in the last 2 years. Many multifamily properties were purchased and not to keep them as multifamily properties. So we've lost lots of units, and I'm sure you've read about it in the paper, that used to be housing. There is a law that came out in a long time ago, 1969, sorry, that was the 40B law. And it's something that, is a really important part of our work at Construct. And that rule is that every town in Massachusetts is required, in quotes, to have 10% affordable housing. But there's no teeth to the law. So when you say required, nothing happens if you don't. But many communities have tried really hard to get there. Stockbridge is there, and Williamstown. Those are the two in Berkshire County that achieved it early on. Great Barrington and Lenox are getting very close. And so as you see, the more affordable housing you have, the more rental units you have, because that tends to be, it's much easier to create rental affordable housing than homeownership affordable housing. And I just want to visit for just a minute before we move on, what exactly we mean by affordable housing. A lot of people think that means, housing the destitute or housing the homeless, but it doesn't. Affordable housing is broken down into categories of income. So portions of the area median income. The area median income in Berkshire County is quite high. It's about $85,000 for a family of 4. And if you have any of the jobs that were in the slide before, you might fall into 50% of area median income, or 60% or 80%. And depending on which category you fall into, you qualify for different units of affordable housing. We can move on, Neil. So this one is packed with data, but I think the takeaway will not be a surprise to anyone, that sales are up. There's been a lot of real estate sales. Prices followed, because that's how capitalism works. And so the area median sale price has increased quite a lot. And it's getting out of reach of people who maybe used to be able to afford to buy a home. So a lot of people have been left out of this market. Even, as I said, multifamily properties have sold to become single family properties. Land has been selling. Land that's been for sale for a very long time started to sell. We haven't really seen the building boom that we saw in the early 2000s, but land is definitely starting to sell, and that's usually what follows. We'll take the next slide, but there might be questions about this one. So construct, what do? We build affordable housing. The unit on the left is from Forest Springs, which we completed in 2018. The middle unit is a house that has 2 apartments that we've owned, 25 years, I think, Jake. And then the one on the right is, you can see the playground at Pinewoods, and that's 30 units of affordable housing at Stockbridge. That's one of the reasons that Stockbridge has their 10% affordable housing. And that is one way to address this problem, is to find a piece of land and build affordable housing on it, to build rentals on it. But in the next slide, we'll talk about another way that those of you who represent a town or are affiliated with a town can do, and that is something called receivership. And Construct is a receiver. We are a nonprofit receiver. We're kind of a rare bird. There's also for-profit receivers, and that's where working with the Attorney General's office and the building inspector in your town, or the health inspector in your town, you identify an abandoned property through the Attorney General's Abandoned Housing Initiative, or a property that is in disrepair, either below building code or below health standards, and try to work with the owner to bring it up. But if the owner's not capable, then you name a receiver for that property. So this is an example in Beckett. The picture on the left is the kitchen, and the picture on the right is the bedroom. And if we look at the next slide, you can see what Construct did with this property. So this property is, we're actually going, because we do work with the housing court to do this. It's a very friendly relationship. So we have our final hearing tomorrow to finish approval of this project, and then we will sell it. This is one way to get affordable home ownership. We will sell it through a lottery program. If you're a for-profit receiver, you would sell it by auction, but we want this to count toward Beckett's affordable housing count that I mentioned earlier. Go ahead, Neil.
And part of, if I can just hop in for a minute, part of why we wanted to include this is that folks are always asking about what about affordable home ownership, and it's more difficult to do. It's much harder to fund. We're very fortunate to have a strong Habitat for Humanity in our community, because it's one of the few models that works for larger scale affordable housing or affordable home ownership. The route that we've found can work for us is this receivership process, but it's one house at a time. So you're at most probably serving 1 or 2 households at a time, whereas with apartments, it's we're able to house more people with those, which I think is part of why the state is more likely to fund rentals.
Okay, and so there is some good news in the last couple of years. I mean, one thing I would say is that we have started to recognize that the people who live in the less expensive housing in our community are essential. They're essential to keeping our community going. And another thing is that we all got really good at Zoom. I mean, look at us now. So part of that was that all of the regional housing providers have joined together in the plan spearheaded by the Berkshire Regional Planning Board to come up with a regional plan. Keep going now. And Jane, you should talk about this one.
Sure. So I think partly being in the South Berkshires, we're not necessarily as aware of what's happening on a more systemic level to address some of the issues. Construct and Berkshire Housing Authority in Pittsfield and Lewison House in the North Berkshires are all part of the 3-county continuum of care that's taking an active look at the racial equity issue in housing solutions, but also helping folks move out of homelessness. And it's really allowed us to have a stronger, to respond more quickly to some of the opportunities that the ARPA funding has provided. For example, many more emergency housing vouchers are flowing right now. And this continuum of care is a central clearinghouse for our 3 counties to make sure that there's equity in the process of getting folks into those opportunities.
Go ahead, Neil. Yeah, and so in the last few years, towns have really started taking steps. We have more affordable housing trusts and committees than ever before. People are looking at creating more CPAs and certainly more community development block grant. That's what CDBG is. Inclusionary zoning and housing production plans. Those are all great steps to get us to where we need to go. Go ahead. And you have us, the housing developers, Construct, Habitat for Humanity, and recently Construct and Habitat have started to work together on some projects. We're very excited about that. Berkshire Housing Development Corporation, they are developing all over the county, and the CDCSB. Everybody's trying to get more units out there. Go ahead. And Construct also does technical assistance. So that means that if you have a property that you think could be affordable housing, but you're not sure if it's feasible, you can ask us and we can put together a feasibility study. And that's like, because always the question is, how much will it cost? How much can it make? And that's really what a feasibility study is. It's putting that whole package together to see if it can work. Go ahead, Neil. And one more, there you go. All right. So there's really good questions in the chat. So I feel like we can start with those. Someone had one in here that I was just, there we go. There's a question about the housing situation, and it's a little personal, but someone who had a rent increase and that their rent could potentially be a significant part of their income. So that what we call that cost burdened. So when Construct houses someone, we have a maximum amount that you can make in order to qualify for the housing. But we also, and this is not something the state recommends, this is something that we do, we have a minimum amount that you can make to afford that unit, because we are not interested in the business of evicting people from housing. We want to house people. So when we never ever try to cost burden someone, and that is when you pay more than 33% of your income for your housing costs. And that, if you are renting, that includes your rent plus your utilities. If you're an owner, that includes your mortgage, your insurance, your taxes, and maybe, like, you know, if you're in a condo, your homeowners association fees. So when you get past 50%, you're severely cost burdened. And we don't have a slide for this, but there's quite a lot of towns now that there's a lot of people that are cost burdens. It does tend to affect renters more than homeowners. And if you're interested in that, there's a really easy website to remember, datatown.org, and that's there. But the other part of this question is, this is someone who's actually experiencing this, and that really matters to us, because we know, and I think all of you can relate to this, that people with secure housing it's just your whole life is easier. If you've got your housing set, you know, you're in a good place, and you have a home, and you can, you know, go from there. And when you don't, that's a very insecure feeling. And I don't like for anybody to experience that. But I'm really proud of Construct. From the very beginning of COVID, we were one of the very first in the state to put together a rental assistance program. And it's still going, is it not, Jane?
Yes.
So yeah, go ahead.
With a lot of support from Great Barrington and the Lennox Affordable Housing Trust, as well as some state funds, but mostly private funds that have come in. We were able to get some rent out the door so that landlords could remain solvent, as well as tenants could not get quite so far behind before the state and federal funds kicked in. And again, that's, you know, there's a place for the state and federal funding and the programs that come through those. But with that comes a lot more bureaucracy, and we're able to often streamline because of the community-based approach that we take, without duplicating the services that they can get elsewhere.
Okay, and Martin Mitzoff had a question about receivership. And the question was that the owner must be delinquent on taxes and or mortgage, and that's not correct. It is really, the property needs to be at building and health standards, and if it's below that, that's when the town can engage. The whole tax collection thing is a different kind of possession. But very often they go hand in hand. So a lot of times, if you have a property that's abandoned or delinquent, you know, those tend to be the same properties. And so it's a really good question for you town officials, because when the receiver gets involved and starts spending money on this property, they have a receiver lien, and that receiver lien is the primary lien, except for taxes. Taxes are not forgivable in a receivership. Taxes supersede the receiver lien. So the taxes will get paid. The back taxes will get paid. And then, of course, when the receivership is done, the property goes back on the tax rolls. And so then the second question was how it works with housing court. And it's really a negotiation. The owner is very much a part of, if the owner is still alive. And sometimes that's how it gets abandoned, that the owner is not alive. But if the owner is still alive and the owner wants to work with the town and try to bring the house up to code, they can. And at any time during the renovation, the owner can satisfy the receiver's lien. So if the receiver comes in, pays off the taxes, and maybe cleans out the junk, and the owner says, I'm good, I can pay that back, I want to step in now, then that happens. The whole process goes through the courts, and there's, you know, it's supposed to be like bi-monthly meetings. COVID kind of messed that up, but nothing can happen without the court's approval, except the owner coming back and satisfying the lien. And I have, you know, the court tries very hard to give people an opportunity to satisfy that lien. And when I say owner, keep in mind that it's either the owner or the heirs or the potential heirs. So the attorney for the receiver has to spend a lot of time and energy seeking out any possible heirs and communicating with all of them at all times. They get all of the reports and all of the information about the receivership. And I think Seth's question was answered by Jane.
Seth, did you want to say anything more about that?
Not really. I mean,
Okay.
I just wondered if it worked similar to a land bank.
Okay. Doug Mishkin has an excellent question about affordable rental housing and transportation. So I'm a wonk and I do tend to get too deep into details, but I'll try not to do that. When we create affordable housing, we apply to all these different sources for funding, and every single one of those sources of funding scores us. And they score us on things like infrastructure that's available, like water and sewer. Is there water and sewer available to the site, or do we have to create our own water and sewer? Also transportation. And because, you know, they're out east, they have they get extra funds and extra points for things that are built on the rail lines. We don't have rail lines, so we actually get a few points for being rural because it makes up for, otherwise we'd never get funded for anything. But that is a question that we wrestle with all the time. And what we do is, you know, we show them a map and we say, it's this many miles, it's this many minutes, because you have to remember, out east, it could be the same number of miles, but it takes 6 times as long because of traffic, you know, and we don't have traffic. So we'll tell them how long it takes to get to amenities, you know, the grocery store, the doctor, et cetera, et cetera. And we have to get creative with that. For example, Forest Springs is not on the bus line, but the bus was willing to work with us, and they will redirect the bus. If someone calls and says, I need, you know, I have to go to work every Monday at 8 o'clock, the bus will come there at Monday, at, you know, in time for them to get to work. So we try to really work with that.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about the economy of scale in this area is we can have those kind of conversations because it's a smaller community. And so the BRTA wants folks to use their service. So if that means they go 1.5 miles up the road so that more people can use it and it can be more useful, they'll do that. But it's also why we are really interested in creating affordable housing in some of the other communities where there's employers who can't find people to work because they have to come from Pittsfield or they have to come farther away. So that's not going to be as large a project as maybe we did in Stockbridge, where we did 30 units, but 8 to 10 units would probably work really well in some of those communities. And a lot of those communities are really struggling for workers. Restaurants that we all love are closing because they can't find workers. The other thing is that the cost burden within the Berkshires, when you put transportation and housing together, it's higher than anywhere else in the state for people at market rate, for people who are at that middle income rate. So that creates a burden, not just for the folks who are at the lower income levels, but at the middle incomes as well. So the more we can have pockets of housing in various neighborhoods and communities close to where people work and live and go to school and all of that, you know, we think that just makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, a big part of rural life, we all know, is you got to have a vehicle. And you know, honestly, most people who don't, they either live in town and walk or they move away because they can't make it work. And that is unfortunate. And, you know, it's probably one of the reasons that we always have a declining population. So, okay, so Pat asked about the CPA program, and that stands for Community Preservation Act. And the towns who have it have a Community Preservation Committee. And the Community Preservation Act is a state program that's been adopted by some towns. There's a surcharge on homeowners, and it goes into a fund. And it is not just for affordable housing. In fact, affordable housing tends to be the one that gets not mentioned, but it's for open space, recreation, historical preservation, and affordable housing. And the CPA funds they have pockets for each of those funds. And then, a certain percentage goes in each of those pockets. And then, someone who's trying to do historic preservation puts in an application to get some of that funding for and then there's a committee that reviews it. And then when the committee chooses, I think we have some people who are CPA members. So fill in if I'm missing anything, but if the committee chooses to fund something, they then send it to town meeting. The town actually votes on it. And Great Barrington was very clever and created an affordable housing trust that got money from the CPA, because the CPA is not very nimble. It takes a really long time. You start your application in November of the prior year. That's part one, and then you do part two, and then it has to go to town meeting. So you get your funding in July, if you get funded. So having an affordable housing trust that can get some of that CPA fund, that makes the town a little more nimble and able to fund more things. There was something else I wanted to say about the CPA. I'll come back to it, but because we have a lot more questions.
Do other folks want to jump in? It'd be great to hear some other voices if there's thoughts, concerns. Well, June and I can read through the chat again a little bit more.
So Fred Clark asked about, I'll just read the question because it's a good question. Is there a concern with building larger affordable housing developments of say 45 units in South County being stigmatized? And Fred, that is, let's face it, all affordable housing gets stigmatized. That's why we're here tonight. People have just such erroneous ideas of what affordable housing is. And, they're kind of afraid of it, to tell you the truth. So yes, the bigger it is, I think the more fear people have about it. On the other hand, the bigger it is, the more economy of scale you have. So, when you're building the bigger properties, it's cheaper and therefore easier, and you can do more with your money. So that's a big plus, but I understand it. If you have a town, for example, let's just take New Marlboro, I'll pick on them. I think their population is maybe around 1,000 people, and they have almost no multifamily housing. So all of a sudden you add 45 units of multifamily housing in this tiny, tiny town that doesn't even have really a grocery store. They have, general stores, but that is hard. That's hard on a town like that. So, if you can maybe put it on Route 7 or, put it in one of the bigger towns, then, it fits a little bit better.
Well, and I think the other, in addition to size, I think one of the things we like to address is making sure that there's a mix of income, that the folks who are coming out of homelessness, who are living on a fixed income because they're retired or for other reasons, that those folks are in a community with folks who are teachers' aides and are some of those other careers that are folks in the populations that we serve. It just seems to work better, just as any neighborhood that has mixed income tends to be more stable. It just kind of makes sense.
It does. Also, I am not a big believer in economic segregation. I think that no segregation is good. I
was going
really
to say, June, if you are in favor of some, we should probably talk tomorrow.
I think that communities that are economically integrated, people get to know each other better. It's less exclusionary. It's just better. Yeah, maybe the person with all their junk in the yard is not a pretty sight to live next to, but they're also a great source of firewood. So and those people have skills that maybe other people don't. So I really like the idea of integrating our communities. Seth Jenkins asked about aging populations, which is one of my favorite questions. Seth, thank you for asking that. So we did not put this in the slides, but South County has something called a Millennial Valley. And that is, actually that term is getting out of date, I guess. Millennials are actually aging up. So now it's a Gen Z Valley. But what it means is, you know, we have a fairly average young person population up to about the age of 20. And then our chart just goes zip, you know, our population just drops in between the ages of 20 and 40 in every community in South County. Not Pittsfield. Pittsfield is the last one that, you know, is still somewhat even. And this is a fairly new thing. In the 90s, when I was raising my kids, it was very equitable. The ages kind of went right across. There was an even distribution. But there are some towns that are just zero from under the age of 40. There's just nobody, you know, Alfred, Mount Washington, there's nobody there. There aren't young people. And when you look at those towns, you have to ask, like, do you have a fire department? How old are the people on your fire department? You know, and the answer is old. You know, there are some communities that are really struggling to address this volunteer fire department problem because they don't have anybody. So Seth asks, what about senior housing projects? And have you done these? And we have not. But Lenox has. So Lenox did many of them. It's one of the reasons they have so much affordable housing. But I think they're slowing down on that because the last one they did, they ran out of seniors house. I don't know how else to put that, but they ended up having to go back to the state and ask to adjust their age because they literally could not. They were calling everyone and saying, please give us all your seniors, because they just ran out of seniors to house. And so now they're doing more family housing and trying to do that.
And they do have a new project that Fred mentioned, and virtually all the businesses in Lenox are coming out in support of this project. You probably saw the article in the Eagle, the Brushwood affordable housing, affordable townhouses is getting really great support, which is wonderful. It's a great sign of a community that really wants to see this happen.
And Seth hit us with two questions in one. And the second question was, are we using LIHTC monies, LIHTC, which is low income housing tax credit, and market rate and affordable, / affordable projects. And we have done the project in Stockbridge is a LIHTC project. I love the LIHTC idea. It is, and this is our own Richie Neal who came up with this idea and got it off the ground. And it's a marriage between the IRS and private corporations. So the corporations buy tax credits and they trade like a commodity. They can trade their tax credits and they get 15 years worth of tax credits in 10 years, as long as we keep the property in compliance. So, and by in compliance, I mean that every year we recertify everyone who lives there and make sure that they are still income qualified. There's a caveat to that, and I will get to it, but I want to talk about the LIHTC thing. It is a fantastic program, and it works really, really well. And one of the reasons it works really well is because of my caveat. When you get into the program, you have to be below the income level. But after one full year, you can make 140% of that income limit and still qualify for housing. And that means, you can get a raise, you can get a promotion, you can get a second job, and you can still qualify for that housing. So it's not disruptive like some of the other housing programs are. That's what I love about it. What I don't love.
I think it's a reason that Pinewoods, which is the one LIHTC project that we have done, more folks from Pinewoods, our 30 units in Stockbridge, have been able to go on to affordable home ownership, not even affordable home ownership, after living there than any of our other properties.
Yeah. Here's what I don't love about it. It's the economy of scale thing. Because you're selling those tax credits, you have to basically market yourself to these investors. And to market yourself to those investors, you have to be building at least 45 units. So we revisit that old problem we have with small towns and infrastructure and not being able to do that. So Fred Gordon says many towns having housing development require a 1 acre lot frontage and side yard requirement. If town has only residential zoning, what's the best approach for denser housing? District overlay, friendly 40B, or subdivide to non-conforming lots? Great question, Fred. So yeah, all of those. So I told you that there was a 40B law a long time ago that says every town needs 10% affordable housing. And the other parts of that law say that if you don't, and here's the only tooth in that law, that an unfriendly developer can come in, and if they make 20% or 25%, depending of their units affordable, they get to make their own zoning laws. They can change the height limit, the setback limit, the density limit, the parking limit. They can change all that and say, well, you have to let us because you don't have any affordable housing, or you don't have enough affordable housing. So that's an unfriendly 40B. What Fred says here is, a friendly 40B, and that's how Construct does business. So we go to the town and we say, look, we want to fit 11 units on 1 acre. And obviously that's not your density rule. So we want you to change that. And we also want you to reduce the number of parking places that we need, because some of these are definitely going to be units of people who don't have cars. We might ask for a setback review and say, we're not going to set it back as far as you would like. And then we work with them and they say, well, we'll give you the parking, but we really want the setback, or something. And we try to accommodate as much as we can. And yes, we have to do a site plan review. The thing about it is, and what we try to do with a 40B is we try to get everyone in the same room. We try to get the planning board and the zoning board and the health board and everybody together. And we say, come on, throw it at us. What are your objections? What would you like to see? So that we can, it takes a little less time to do that. And we really try to accommodate the town and the neighbors. We try to work with the people, but we do have, the 40B gives you some power, because the state has never upheld a rejected 40B application, never, in all the years we've been doing it. Not just us, in all the years Massachusetts has had this law. And this goes back to a question someone else asked about zoning. And I think what happened here is, we, like many other states, have a racist history in zoning. So there was redlining, and that, what redlining is, where someone said, okay, all the people of this race are going to live here, and all the people of this race are going to live here. And, realtors wouldn't show you a house, and, they were allowed to do that. Well, when that was outlawed, towns took on a different tact. And so they created exclusionary zoning, and they made lot size bigger, and they made setbacks bigger, and they shrunk the ability to create multifamily housing. And it really worked, obviously, because we have very little multifamily housing in Berkshire County. And so the 40B law was meant to address that, and say, we need to give towns a way to create multifamily housing. So Anne asks if anyone's looking at 148 Maple Ave. I know, isn't that exciting? So yes, everybody's looking at 148 Maple Avenue. So it went up for sale. It went into contract. It fell out of contract. It went up for sale again. It went into contract. And as far as I know, it's still in contract.
Well, But during that process, the town of Great Barrington approved it for 30 units of affordable housing, I believe.
No, not affordable.
I thought it was.
No, they
Okay.
just approved, they
Which is
approved the
great. We need
plan.
market rate almost as much, if not more, than we need affordable. So
Right, okay, so that's
both are
another
good.
issue. That's not really construct's issue, except that, we like to house people. So, it's, again, it's capitalism, it's supply and demand. When you only have some rental units, and you have people looking for rentals, they will take what's available. It may not be up to their standards, but they're going to take it because they need somewhere to live. So sometimes what happens with that is someone who can afford a really nice unit will rent a cheaper unit because that's all that's available. That takes that cheaper unit offline for someone who's at maybe 70% of area median income. So they're over our limit. We can't take them, but they're not certainly at market rate. And so the more we take rental units out of the mix, the harder it is to house anybody. And so that may be what's contributing to our millennial valley, our Gen Z valley. People are leaving. I mean, raise your hand if you got out of school and bought a house. I'm not
Smitty
saying you.
Pignatelli's not on the call, so he's the
Right.
only person I know who was able to do that.
Ever. The only person I've ever met, right? Most people, when you're young, you bounce, right? You either rent or you get roommates and rent, or you couch surf, or, I personally lived in a tent for a couple of years, but, so it's normal to be looking for, a rental. That's just what young people do. And if young people can't find it, young people don't stay. Okay. Oh, the ADU question. Oh, goody. Someone asked that. Oh, Seth, by the way, no, we've never had an unfriendly 40B. And so that's, one of the reasons that it has no teeth. And yet we still managed to get friendly 40Bs through. Jonathan asked if Construct has considered creating or assisting homeowners with the development of ADUs. So I could escape this question by saying we really don't have the bandwidth for that, but I'm going to be totally honest with you and say, I appreciate, ADUs are accessory dwelling units, and that is a zoning law that allows you to build, a rental unit on your property. So that we used to call them in-law units, or you can build a unit over your garage or your barn or something, because it used to be one lot, one unit, and now the ADU law changes that. So I have two objections to that. One, Beckett did it. Beckett has an ADU law, and most of them are not rented. Most of them are not used as rentals. Many get used as vacation rentals, and so like some towns want to tweak their law so that ADUs cannot be vacation rentals, and I can't remember the name of the town, but they came up with a very clever law that said you have to actually live either in the house or in the ADU. But the other objection that I have is that being a landlord is really hard, and it's really hard in Massachusetts. It's kind of a good thing. We're a very tenant-friendly state, and we should be proud of that. We really take care of our tenants. But if you are a landlord of 500 units and someone, you have one tenant who just doesn't pay the rent and doesn't pay the rent, and you take 6 months to get them out, and you finally evict them, you just write that off. That's just a business loss. But if you are an elderly couple with an ADU and that person doesn't pay their rent and doesn't pay their rent, and you don't know the law, and you take 6 months to get them out, it's kind of discouraging to someone. Okay.
And while it's not formal ADUs, many of the landlords that we have in the South Berkshires are the folks that are renting out the other half of the duplex, or they have a fourplex and they live in one of them. Most of the landlords are renting to folks who are very close to their own income level, and without that rent coming in, they won't make it either. So on the one hand, I agree with June that it's hard to be a landlord. And so therefore, the more that we can do to help the landlords that we've got be successful, I think the better.
Yeah. So Tom, I wasn't ignoring you. I just wanted to save this question toward the end because it is a really loaded question, but Martin just poked me about it. So I'm going to get to it. And that is, I've heard that Lenox and Stockbridge are putting conditions on Airbnbs in their towns. Is that true? Do you know if towns in South County are headed in that direction? And does contract advocate for things like that? And
oh, we're out of time. Sorry. we are almost out of time.
I know. And then wait, Martin said the elephant in the room, Airbnb, is it sucking up affordable rental opportunities, or you call them SPACs or REITs from Wall Street? Yeah, they are. You know, and I have to admit, I'm kind of middle ground on this. On the one hand, as I said, I believe in you know, economic integration, and that includes the middle class. And the middle class said, hey, being a landlord in this state is really hard. But look, there's this thing, there's this Airbnb thing. Let's do that. It's cheaper and easier, and you have way more protection because Airbnb looks out for you. If someone misbehaves in your unit, you can give them a bad review and then they don't get to be an Airbnb anymore. So it is an answer for the middle class. It really is a problem for rentals, as you say. And for a while, when it was just that mom and pop saying, you know, let's do an Airbnb, I was a fan. But now people are actually doing it professionally, and they buy up as many units as they can, and they rent them out, which, you know, gives people a chance to enjoy our community temporarily. But yeah, it's very hard on our population, and I think the SPACs are worse because those are people who are doing long-term rentals, but not in a nice way. And so, yeah, I do have a problem with that.
You know, I think it's interesting. And again, this is why I love a community-based approach and community conversation. When I first moved to the Berkshires about 5 years ago, everyone blamed second homeowners for all of the lack of affordable housing. And now it's being blamed on Airbnb. And I think it's always easy to point fingers. I'm much more interested in us working together to find solutions so that we can be successful, and that anyone who wants to live here and contribute to the South Berkshires can afford to do it. And I think that there's room for all of it. We just need more balance.
So, and one big question that I have is, you know, what can I do? What can I do? You know, obviously support Construct. We love having your support. But another thing you can do is show up. So if your town is having a hearing about affordable housing, like you did tonight, you know, there's a lot of data out there that says that when affordable housing gets killed in the meeting, it's because the people who showed up were the people against it, and they're older, whiter, and richer than the people who need the housing. So what we need is people to show up and say, yes, yeah, I want this in my backyard. Please build more housing. You know, my favorite restaurant closed because they couldn't find servers, and the cooks wouldn't drive from Pittsfield. So if there was affordable housing a mile down the road, then people could live in the community where they work, and I could go to my favorite restaurant and enjoy that. So yeah, show up and say yes. Be the first at the microphone to say, this is a great idea. Let's make this
And
happen.
if you need help with the talking points, we're always here. So I'm going to turn it back to Neil, because we want to respect folks' time.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, June. I want to notice that, right, it is so we can start on time and end on time. We're hitting that Zoom o'clock hour where we all end up a little over Zoomed. So I want to thank everybody for joining in tonight. especially thanks to Jane and to June for sharing your expertise. We can give a sort of the Zoom handshake, the Zoom clapping for your presentation tonight. One of the takeaways in having walked with you in this process as a board member over the last several years is, and it really came through in your presentation tonight, is just how detailed creating affordable housing is. How much attention to detail, how much understanding how the alphabet soup of affordable housing works. It takes a certain level of dedication and know-how, and that you are in our community doing this work gives me great confidence for who we are as a community, as a single community. It is essential, as you both said in your presentation tonight. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank my fellow board members for joining in on the call tonight. It's good to see everybody. And also thank all of you for your time and your energy in this work as well. To everyone on the call tonight, again, we'll be following up to this call. If you'd like to see the slide deck or the recording of the call, it'll be made available in some form or fashion, either on the website or Facebook or the like in the next day or so. So make sure to reach out or in those follow-up emails, ping us back so we can make sure that we get you whatever resources you're looking to get. This was imagined to be a 101 and a chance to connect on a 101 level around affordable housing. We definitely, I think we hit the 201, 301 level in some of the conversation tonight. So thanks for the good questions and the effort here. And so with that, I think we'll sign off and say thank you once again, and hope to see everybody at further conversations about how we can make South County a place for everybody in our community. Be well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you.